Yes, all right, we're recording. Thank you, Robert. All right, so notice here, all right, and I'll move through it at a relatively quick pace, but I want to point some things out. The liver is on your right side. It's important that you know that, especially for those of you that are going into healthcare, people that complain of what we call subcostal right pain here, that could be your liver. If you want to see if someone has an enlarged liver, you have them lay on their back, you ask them to take a deep breath in, and as they're blowing in, you hook your fingers up under the ribs. If you can feel the liver kind of poking down, you shouldn't normally, in a normal person, you should not feel the liver, okay? When I say a normal person, you know, somebody that's not ill. All right, so this here, I think, is on page, what's that, what page? Page 3, okay, page 3. All right, so again, the nice thing about 210 is, this is the only thing that you have to know about the liver, all right? When you get into 211, you'll have to know the different parts of the liver, okay? So moving on to the next one, this one here is what, 86? All right, 86. So this is on page 86, and this is again showing you the relation. This is pretty much all the digestive organs here. You can see the relation of the liver, all right, in the digestive tract, along with the stomach and the large and small intestines and the pancreas here. Okay. So again, the liver's on the right, and the stomach's over here on the left. Going back to page 3, you see this green sac. That's the gallbladder. What's the purpose of the gallbladder? What's it do? For bile, that's right. It actually stores the bile. The liver makes the bile. The gallbladder stores the bile. So when you have a fatty meal, right, you release this hormone called CCK, cholecystokinine, and it causes the gallbladder to contract. It squirts the bile out into your duodenum, into the small intestine. Okay. All right. So getting here into the stomach. All right. There's an entrance and an exit. The entrance is what we refer to as the cardiac sphincter, okay? So that entranceway is surrounded by muscle tissue, and that muscle tissue can contract and relax, letting things enter into the stomach, but also, hopefully, preventing things from leaving the stomach. For those that have esophageal reflux disease or GERD, all right, brain fart, gastroenterol reflux disease, all right? Brain fart, sorry guys. Sometimes they have a malfunction with the cardiac sphincter, all right? The exit is the pyloric sphincter, okay? That's where the food product is going to exit out of your stomach. All right, so cardiac sphincter is called the cardiac sphincter because it's closer to the heart. Pyloric sphincter is closer to the intestine. So our stomach, over a long period of time, has evolved into a structure that needs to, like most of our digestive organs, has found ways to do a lot with a little. What I mean by that is you don't have very much real estate in your body. Everything's crammed into a small area there, okay? So what your stomach has done, as has the small intestine and the large intestine, is found a way to increase the surface area. And that's what these folds are, the rugae. It's like Ruffles, potato chips. Ruffles have ridges, so does your stomach. All right, so the rugae is a way that your stomach has evolved into increasing the surface area so it can digest more, all right, with the little amount of space that it has, okay? So that's what the rugae are used for. All right, so here's a picture of the outside of the stomach. All right, I'm not sure what page that's on. That's probably 86, maybe. And that might not even be in the line unless they took it out, but I don't think so. Anyone know where that is? Nowhere? No, it's not in there. All right, don't worry about it. I'm sure everybody at home is looking for it too. No sweat. All right, this one here, I believe, is page 86. It's just the bottom portion of that one. So going through, all right, our digestive tract, starting with the mouth, going down to the esophagus, which we saw on Tuesday, then the stomach. Now we're going into the small intestines. The first portion of the small intestines is the duodenum. Some people pronounce it duodenum, okay? Some of our colleagues up in Canada. All right, so there's 3 parts to the small intestine. All right, so if on the test there's an arrow pointing to this area, or if there's an arrow pointing to this area, or an arrow pointing to this area, don't just put small intestine. You won't get it right, okay? You need to be specific. Be as specific as you can. Most of the likely you'll get credit. And make sure if there's wording on the question that you read the wording, because sometimes the wording will ask you the function of whatever it's pointing to. People will identify it, which is great, but sometimes it asks, what is the function of this, or what is this secrete? Okay, so if you see word, most of the time if there's no wording on the question, it's a straight up identification. So if it's pointing to the heart, just say the heart. Okay, but if there's wording, make sure you read it, because people miss points on that all the time. All right, so here, this one here, I believe is a, I don't know, 83 or 89? 89, okay? This model is on, thank you, Michelle. All right, and I'm going to get to know your guys' names too. All right, guys, I'm sorry. My New York is showing through. Upstate New York, you say you guys. What are you guys doing tonight? Down here, you say y'all. Does anyone know what the plural for y'all is? All y'all.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Someone told me that. I don't know if it's a joke or not. But anyway, all y'all. Anyway, okay. So in this model here, you can see, all right, the duodenum right here. It's next to, all right, the pancreas. This is called the head of the pancreas. You don't even know that for this semester. And then it's also next to, it's near, I should say, the right kidney here. Okay, but we'll go through all that. And here's your gallbladder. All right, right there. All right, so this is the duodenum. All right, going back to page 86. All right, the second part of your small intestine is what we refer to as the jejunum. Okay, so on these questions here, I'll explain it to you in a second. Hold on, hold that thought. Okay, so the jejunum is relatively all of this area here of the small intestine. Right through here. Okay, it's the second part of the small intestine. All right, now I'm going to zoom in on this one here just to kind of give you an understanding. So people can get the jejunum and the ileum confused. All right, but the only way that we'll really ask you what the ileum is it's going to be close to. This is where the small intestine terminates here. You can see. All right, where the small intestine is going to empty into the large intestine right over here.
So that whole area is the
and some. It's not perfectly, I would say, yeah, it's more like kind of over this region here, okay? But the point being is, we'll have the arrow closer to the end of it, so you definitely know that it's the ileum and not the jejunum, okay? Okay. All right, so on the same page, all right, you can see the pancreas, all right, and I want you to kind of understand and appreciate its location. One, it's below the stomach, so it's hypogastric, below the stomach. It's above this structure here. This is the transverse colon. We'll see that in a second. But it's also in between this organ over here. This is the spleen, okay, and then the duodenum. Okay, so it's kind of sandwiched in between all those structures there. So the stomach, the duodenum here, then you can see our the transverse colon, or the large part of the large intestine, and then we've got the spleen over here, okay? So we'll go over to this one here. I can't remember. Is this 83? 89, all right, thank you. 89, so you can see here again, it's a little bit more blown up. All right, you can see here's the spleen, this kind of bluish, purplish, grayish structure here. All right, at the tail, this is called the tail of the pancreas. All right, and then by the head and the neck, this is where that's the duodenum. It's kind of stuck in between there. The pancreas is actually a gland. It's an exocrine endocrine gland, and we'll talk about that. Exocrine glands, all right, have ducts. So you can see all these little ducts here. So the pancreas is going to secrete stuff into these little tube structures, these ducts, and then the pancreas will shoot it out here, all right, into the small intestine. It's also an endocrine gland. Endocrine glands lack ducts. They don't have a duct to excrete their contents. So what they'll do is they'll just excrete the contents outside the cells or into the bloodstream that's close by. So like your thyroid gland, your adrenal glands. There's a lot of, well, at chapter 17, you'll learn about that in 211. Well, you'll talk about the endocrine system. All right, yes, ma'am.
What was the spelling of
IL, and that's important too, ILEUM, okay? Because there's another ileum in your body, all right? And that's your hip bone, and that's spelled ILIUM. So that's why it's important that they sound the same, but they're spelled differently. And one letter can make that wrong. So that's why spelling is very important. You know, if you were to tell somebody in surgery, you need to cut out the ileum, all right, and you spell it ILIUM, you're going to come out of surgery with no hip bones, all right? So that's why that'll never happen, but that's just an exaggeration. Okay, so here's the spleen. It's the largest lymphatic organ in the body. All right, this is back to page 3, I want to say. So you can kind of get an appreciation of where the spleen is located here. All right, right under the rib cage, right beneath the diaphragm. We can't see the stomach, all right, because we took it out, but the stomach kind of sits in front of all this stuff here. All right, so the spleen is over here on the left side. So one of the ways, it's not a very good way, but they've done it in the past, one of the ways to tell if somebody has, anyone here ever had mononucleosis? Mono? Okay, so what happens with people with mono, their spleen gets enlarged. I don't know if you knew that, if that had happened to you. Most of the time, it's not really anything that's clinically significant. But one way to find out if you're suspecting mono is same thing I said with the liver. Take a deep breath and blow it out. As you're blowing out, you can tuck your fingers up under the rib cage there. Not hard, but if you can feel something, the spleen will be somewhat kind of a rubbery consistency, then you have an enlarged spleen. So that's one of the ways that can help you make your diagnosis if you're suspecting mono. All right, spleen. All right, I don't know what page this is, y'all.
3.
Did you say 83?
No, 3.
3, oh, all right, page 3. All right, because we're going to go back between page 3 and 86 here again. All right, so just, all right, now we're on the large intestine. So the first part, you can see here's where the ileum, all right, is going to start to empty into this first part of the large intestine. It's this sac-like structure that's called the cecum. Okay? So we're going to start to move food, all right, through the large intestine and prepare it for defecation, all right? So here's the cecum. We're going to go back and forth between two models. Here it is on page 86. Is this 86 or 83? 86? Okay. All right. So again, it's the same thing. We're going to go back and forth between those two pages, so keep them marked. So here's the cecum on this model. All right, and then you got this little structure that hangs off the cecum. Okay, that's the appendix. It's also known as the vermiform, all right, appendix. So I'll spell that for you. I believe that's also in your lab manual. All right, vermiform appendix. Hangs right off the cecum. I'll show you on this model here. There it is on page 86. Okay.
How do you spell it again? The
Vermiform,
Yeah.
V-E-R-M. Oh, hold on. Why is my brain not working? Vermiform. Why am I having this problem? Sorry. I know. I don't know how to enlarge it, and I don't know if there's a way to enlarge it. There's got to be a way.
Can you read that out? Now that you have
Or type it in the
Here.
chat. You type it in the chat a little bigger.
it
It works too.
There, how's that? Don't judge me.
I mean, it's bigger than the smaller text. So
It's a pain in the rear. All right, so vermiform appendix. And there's that appendix. All right, now moving through, as we're starting to move through closer to the exit of our gastrointestinal tract, this part here on the right side of your body, remember these slides are mostly going to be at the anatomical position. So the person should be facing us, okay? So this is on the right side of the body, okay? So we call it the ascending colon because things inside of it are going to move upwards, okay, toward your head. All right, going over here to 86. All right, same thing. You can see the ascending colon. It's going to move towards this bend here. All the food stuff is going to move towards this bend. So we give the bend a name. And for this class, you're going to refer to it as the hepatic flexure. We call it the hepatic flexure because it's close to the liver. Okay? All right, so the hepatic flexure. Let me show you on the other model here. Back on page 3, hepatic flexure.
So that literally just means that stuff holding.
It's just the bend. Yep.
Does it do anything special? Or?
Nope. Nope.
If I'm like a board and like, you don't need names for everything. You don't have to do anything. It's just there. You get a name for it.
Everything. Oh yeah, trust me. I mean, now there's several other, I shouldn't say several other names, but there's more than one name for this. All right. There's also the left colonic. No, that's the right side. The right colonic flexure. But our class, because there's, and sometimes you have to forgive me, I might slip in between because for some structures there's like 2, 3 possible names. But I'm trying my best to keep it with whatever's in your lab manual because that's what you guys are responsible for. All right. So if you have the lab manual, that's going to be one helpful for the studying of for the spelling for these items. But those are going to be the terms that you'll be expected to know. Now there'll be other, you know, you go through certain anatomy books and look at the same thing. You might see 1 or 2 other names for it. But for this class, we want you to know those terms. Okay. All right. Hepatic flexure. All right, now we start to see the colon large intestine start to straighten out here. So we're going to go from the right side of the body over to the left side of the body. This is the transverse colon. Okay. Transverse colon, and now go to page 86, and you can see the same thing. Here's the transverse colon, right below the pancreas there. All right, so now we're starting to proceed towards this other kind of flexure here or bend. All right, so of course we call that the splenic flexure because it's close to the spleen. You guys remember that the spleen is over there on the left side of the body. All right, and here it is on page 86, splenic flexure. All right, we're getting closer to the end of the digestive tract. Now we're going to start to move food down, all right, down towards the exit here. So we refer to that part of the colon as the descending colon. Descending colon is over there on the left side. And here you see it on page 86, descending colon. All right, we're getting closer to the end here. So now the colon takes almost like a curve, a quick curve, and in some regard, how I remember it, it almost looks like an S. You can't really see it here, but it almost looks like an S. So that part of the colon is called the sigmoid colon because it's going to move back and down into your pelvis there. Okay, sigmoid colon. Here it is on page 86. Here it is, sigmoid colon right here. All right, so your large intestine is going to drop. By this point, okay, the material that's in your large intestine is pretty much closely resembling fecal material, what you're going to excrete out of your body when you go to the bathroom, right? So that's going to start to build up in this area here called the rectum. All right, so we're going to see a couple new models here in a second, all right? So back here on page 86, here's the rectum. All right, now this is a new slide. Is this page 2? It's either page 2 or 91, I think.
Page 4.
Page 4. Oh, all right, page 4. All right, so this is a mid-sagittal model, okay, which means that we've cut this model right down the midline here, okay, so we've cut it in half. So just to kind of give you some perspective on what's around here, okay, here's your spine right here. Here's your spinal cord. Here's your spine. Here's your sacrum, which is that bone in between your hips, and here's your tailbone. This is your rear end, okay? So right in front of your tailbone, okay, is your rectum. This is a female model, okay? One, because I don't see any external genitalia resembling a male, all right? But I see a uterus here, okay? And in front of that, I see the urinary bladder. I also see the fallopian tube and the ovary. Okay. Now we're looking, this one here, what page is this one on?
Same page.
Same page, 4. Awesome. All right, so this is a sagittal cut. So we're not going down directly down the middle of our specimen here. So you can see the rectum in kind of a more full view here. All right. For obvious reasons, we know it's a male model, but we're also not seeing the uterus here. Okay. What about this one? Is this on page 4?
No.
95 or 91? 95. Okay, they're both on 95. 95, okay. So again, here you can see, all right, here's the rectum here, all right, and you can see the urinary bladder in front. This is also another male model because you can see part of the scrotum there. I think that's all the rectum. Nope, we got another rectum. All right. This page, is this also 95?
Yeah.
94. Oh, this is page 4. All right, check page 4 for those of you at home that aren't sure. Okay? I'm almost positive this is the last rectum one. This is 95 for you?
Well, it's like the same
That's
picture.
all.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, 4,
It's
94.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Brings you
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. I'm almost positive this is the last rectum one. All right. So finally, the last part of your gastrointestinal tract is the anus. Okay. All right. And then this is going back to 86, I believe. All right, the anus has 2 sphincters. It's called the internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter. You'll learn more about it in 211 when you do the GI tract. But it's the external anal sphincter, which is the one that you learn how to potty train with. Okay, so you do have some voluntary control, because eventually, no matter how hard you might try to fight it, all right, eventually nature wins, and your body will excrete whatever it is. All right, especially if you've ever gotten a bout of diarrhea. All right, and this one here is, I don't remember.
Page 4.
Page 4. Okay. So I think that should be it for the digestive tract. Almost positive. Okay. I'm going to come back to this slideshow here. I'm going to try something I did a little bit differently than what I did with my last class. I'm going to switch over to the other slideshow that I wanted to go over. And I say that only because there's a couple things that I wanted to show you on this, all right, before your brains kind of zone out. And it's always easier to label things when you're a little bit tired than it is to learn the concepts here. So I exhausted the last class last night, so I want to switch to this. We'll come back and finish labeling here. But I do just do a few more of the lab notes here. And some of this stuff we've already gone over, but there was like 3 things that I wanted to cover that I wanted to make sure that you knew, okay? So we talked about some of the characteristics about living things, I believe, when we did some of the lecture material, but there was a couple other things that I did want to talk to you about, all right, in regards to our ability for homeostasis and whatnot, all right. One is, and we already talked about this concept about what happens with us as organisms and how the whole homeostasis system, how you have a receptor control center and effector, and all of that is based upon our responsiveness to a stimuli. Something occurs, that stimuli, all right, you know, you've heard that term that for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction. With this, it's for every type of stimuli, there's going to be some sort of reaction that's going to occur in our body, whether it's a stimuli that's external to us or internal to us. And our ability to notice that stimuli, we refer to it as responsiveness, okay? So when we talk about homeostasis here, about our body's ability to maintain mainly the proper function, all right, especially physiological functions, maintain our normal body temperature, maintain our ability to digest food properly, circulate blood properly, being in that homeostasis, all right, we have to be able, like blood pressure, for example, we have to be able to maintain that normal range of blood pressure. We have to regulate that, because if our blood pressure gets too high, what can happen? Stroke out. Yeah, you're darn right. You stroke out, if your blood pressure becomes too low, what can happen? You pass out. Yeah. Okay? So we have to be able to regulate both the internal bodily functions for any type of environmental change, both inside our bodies and outside our bodies. And one last thing is, all living things, regardless, want to be able to reproduce. All right? It's inherent into our genes that we want to be able to reproduce. And when I say all living things, all the cells in our body, they want to reproduce. Okay? They want to divide, multiply, all right? Especially when you're growing. Okay? So that's what we see here when we're talking about our cells. Okay? All right. So we want to get new cell growth to repair damaged or old ones. We want to maintain those that are actually in existence, especially our neurons, because they don't regenerate. Well, you take that back. You're not going to grow new neurons. All right? Certain cells, once you've grown them, you're not going to grow. That's it. Okay? So some of our skeletal muscle cells, our neurons, all right, and if they get damaged, we want to fix them. Okay? So we want to. That's what when we're referring to reproduction. It's not just, you know, having kids, having offspring. It's replacing the cells in our bodies, the tissues in our bodies. All right, and also then, I mean, not to forget that we do want to reproduce with our sex cell, our gamete cells. Okay. All right, this picture here we already saw. All right, this is the levels of organization, and today we started with the chemical level. All right, and then next week we'll finish up the chemical level and start with the cellular level. Okay, so you can see how this class is going to start to progress through these, and then eventually we're going to get to the organ system level when we learn about the skin, all right, muscles, the nervous system, all right, and then our special senses. All right, and then when you're done with this class, you'll have an awesome understanding, all right, of the organismal level. Okay. All right, so here's a picture in your textbook. It's just showing that. All right, how we're starting off with the small, simple structures, and then we're going to be progressing and moving up to the more complex structures. Then eventually, we'll have a great understanding of the organism as a whole. So in this semester, we're going to go over these 4 systems. Okay, once we get to the system level. All right, the first one's the integumentary system. That's the skin, the largest organ in your body. And then the skeletal system, the muscular system, skeletal being the bones, and then the nervous system. And then in 211, you'll finish the rest. Okay, so it seems like a lot, but trust me, in 211, you don't have to learn about the cells because you already know them, all right, or where tissues are. Okay, so we get all the basics out of the way, so then you just pick up where you left off and just keep going with the system. And I've heard some people, and I don't know if you folks have talked to students that have done both anatomy, 210 and 211, but a lot of folks that have told me they found that 211 wasn't as hard. Well, one, because you already know what's expected of you, so there's not that fear of the unknown. All right, and it's for some folks it's more interesting. Yes, sir.
Question. For 211, do you still use the same lab book? Like,
Everything. You use everything the same. Yep. So you bought everything for this class and next class. Yep, you're good to go. All right, so we saw the anatomical position. You guys remember that, right? So the person's going to be standing on their feet parallel to the floor, flat. Okay? The palms are going to be facing forward. Their arms are going to be at their side. Their head's going to be looking straight ahead. Okay? Just want to kind of give you a quick reminder of that. All right, we did the sections in the plane, so I'm going to skip over that part. And anatomical directions, we discussed that. Want to get into, all right, this is the new, the ones that I showed you last class were from the second edition textbook. This is the third edition textbook. And these two pictures, figure 1.7a and 1.7b, again, there's test questions involved here. And your study guide, your lab study guide, there's a chart in there that you need to fill out. Okay? And you're going to fill that chart out with some of these terms. And every semester people ask me, how do I fill that out? Remember, these study guides are for you, so you want to be able to understand it. So what I tell folks, for example, if we're looking at, we'll do the head here, okay? So you can label the different parts of the head, all right, like the forehead here, and then you can write in there frontal, all right, to label that part, and then you can write it in the parentheses what it means to you. Like that's the forehead, okay? So if we're talking about the cheek, all right, that's this bluish, I don't know what color that is, like greenish, blue, aqua, whatever, all right? All right, the anatomical term is buccal region, but our layman's term is cheek, okay? So that's what the study guide is asking you for. The anatomical term that you would use, and then define it. So just use one word. Again, these study guides are so that you can understand. All right, like the armpit, a perfect example, all right? The armpit, all right, is the common term that we all use, but anatomically it's referred to as the axillary region. Okay, so that's to help answer some of those questions. Okay, so study these. All right, these two pages or these two figures here, 1.7a and then 1.7b. Right, and then when you're filling out your study guide, all right, put in the anatomical term and then write in the term that you'll understand. Okay, like antecubital, front of the elbow. Okay. All right. Sit back. Here we go. Well, actually, don't sit back. Lean forward, because this part here, all right, can be somewhat confusing. But I want to discuss this. All right. The body cavities and the membranes. The membranes, in my opinion, are going to be a little bit more important. So I'm going to really stress that. But I got to go over the body cavities with you first. Okay. So let's start with the body cavities. Body cavities are these spaces in your body in which you're going to have your internal organs residing in. They're going to be living in these spaces. So we've named these body cavities and we've broken them down into two divisions. Okay? So the first one we're going to talk about is the posterior aspect, and the second one is the ventral cavity. Okay? All right. So let's start off with the posterior aspect. And look at the name. Posterior means back. You guys happen to know what ventral means? Anyone? Forward. Anterior. Yep, it's another term for, you've heard of the dorsal fin on a shark. Dorsal is back. Okay? So ventral is front. Okay? Just another term for anterior or frontal. Okay? So the posterior aspect is going to be on the back. So let's talk about that. Okay? One thing, make sure that you know this. The posterior aspect is completely encased in bone. Okay, so this cavity is completely surrounded by bone. And the reason why is because this structure lives in the posterior aspect. Does anyone know what that is? Say what? Central nervous system. That's absolutely right. Is the central nervous system important? Darn right, yeah. It's pretty much, remember what we said. It's one of the control centers for your body, right? You have the central nervous system uses the nervous system, which uses the electricity component, and then the endocrine uses the chemical, right? So it's kind of important that we protect the central nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of two structures: the brain, okay, and then your spinal cord. I'm not going to write out spinal cord. Just call it SC. Okay? So, when we talk about the posterior aspect, we subdivide that down into two subdivisions. Okay? The first one is your cranial cavity. What's that? Your skull. That's where your brain lives. Okay? So now that's nice. We've surrounded the brain with bones to keep it safe. I like that idea. All right? The second one is the vertebral canal, your spine. Okay? That's great because that protects the spinal cord. Okay? So keep that in mind. The posterior aspect is going to be, all right, your skull and your spine. And that's it. So the other cavities are going to be everything else. So let's find out what those are going to be. All right? The ventral cavity. One, it's bigger than the posterior cavity, or posterior aspect. All right? And ventral means front, so it's going to be in the front, in the anterior portion. Now here's the thing, here's the difference. All right? It doesn't completely encase all of its organs in bone. Okay? Only some are. And we're going to learn which parts. So of course, we subdivide this off into two cavities. All right? You've got your thoracic cavity, that's your chest, right, where your ribs are, okay, and your sternum. And then you've got your abdominal pelvic cavity. Now, I don't have room to write all this out, but there are subdivisions to the thoracic cavity, and there are subdivisions to the abdominal pelvic cavity, which we'll see here in a second. Okay? You guys good so far? Okay, so far? Okay, all right, good. Because this is the easier stuff. All right? When we get to the membranes, it's getting just a little bit more complicated. Okay. All right, before I get into the membranes here, let's just look at the pictures here really quick of the body cavities. Okay, so here you can see, here's the posterior aspect, here's the cranial cavity, where the brain's going to be, and then here's the vertebral canal, where your spine is. Okay, so that's the posterior aspect. Now, when we go to the other body cavity, the ventral cavity, right, we partition that off into two cavities. You got your thoracic cavity, so your chest right here, okay, where your heart, lungs are going to be, all right, and some blood vessels and several other structures. And then you got this guy right here. This is the diaphragm. So the diaphragm divides the thoracic cavity from the other cavity, which is called the abdominal pelvic cavity. And then we're going to further subdivide the abdominal pelvic cavity into the abdominal cavity, and then the pelvic cavity. So what's the division between the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity? Put your hands on your hips. Anything that's below your hands, all right, that's going to be the pelvic cavity. Anything above your hands up to your diaphragm, that's the abdominal cavity. Okay? All right, so that's what we're kind of seeing here. Easy so far, or not too difficult, I'm hoping. Okay? I won't say anything's easy, because it's new. Okay? All right, so going back to the thoracic cavity, we further subdivide the thoracic cavity, right, into three subdivisions. All right, we've got the mediastinum. All right, and I'll go over these in a moment. But the mediastinum is the center portion. It's the median portion of the thoracic cavity. Okay. Then we have what we call the pericardial cavity, which is where your heart's going to be. And then you have your pleural cavities, and that's where your lungs are going to be. Okay? We'll talk a little bit about those in a bit. All right? So let's now move on to the other topic here. All right? Membranes. All right? I'll give you a second to write some stuff down while I take a quick sip. Okay, so some of these cavities are lined with membranes, all right? But specifically, serous membranes when we're talking about the ventral cavity. So not talking about the posterior aspect, because that's something different we'll talk about later, not in this chapter, all right, but later on in the course. But the ventral cavity, all right, and its subdivisions are lined by these membranes called, you need to know this, serous membranes. Okay, there's 4 membranes in your body. Okay, you don't just know for this class right now, you're going to learn 2 of them. All right, and then in 211 you'll learn the other 2. Serous membranes, the cutaneous membrane, which is your skin, mucous membranes, which we're all pretty familiar with. They line our nose, our throats, and whatnot, and then our anal region in the vagina. And then I'm always forgetting the other one. So, it'll come to me. All right, but there's 4. All right, I don't know why. I rattled them off last night. I just can't remember the 4th one right now. Serous, cutaneous, mucus, and anyways, it'll come to me. Okay, so let's get back to serous membranes. All right, so there's 2 layers to the serous membranes. And so understand, when I say 2 layers, 2 cell layers, okay? And they're usually, the 2 layers are usually one right on top of the other, okay? So the first layer that we're going to talk about is the parietal layer, and that's going to line, it's important that you know this, the internal surface of the body wall. Okay, the internal surface. So in the abdominal pelvic cavity, on the inside of our bodies, all right, you have the parietal layer of this membrane lines that area there. Okay, the other layer is going to line the organs. Another name for organs is viscera. So we call that the visceral layer. So if I were to reach into your chest and pull out your heart, if I'm looking at your heart, what I'm seeing is the visceral layer. I pull out your liver, I see the visceral layer lining your liver, lining your stomach, lining your intestines. All right? So the visceral layer, and so we call it the visceral layer because our organs are called viscera. Okay? So when you're looking at it, the visceral layer is the actual external layer of whatever organ you're looking at. So in between these 2 layers, we have a cavity, and that's called the serous cavity. And in that cavity, we generate or produce a liquid called the serous fluid. All right? And it acts as a lubricant. So what happens when you rub your hands back and forth real fast and hard? You said friction? And you get hot. Yeah, both are exactly right. The friction generates heat. Heat can generate damage. So when your heart is beating or you're inhaling, you're breathing, right, your lungs inflate, they get big, they get small. They get big, they get small. When your heart contracts and relaxes, it gets big, it gets small. Well, think about what happens with these 2 layers that surround your heart. They're going to be moving constantly, okay? So if there wasn't any lubricant, what happens to your engine if you don't have any oil in it? It burns out, it seizes, and it's broken. Well, that's what can happen with your organs. If there's no lubricant between those layers, it can cause damage. You don't want damage to these organs because you could die, okay? So that's what the serous fluid does. It helps to reduce that friction, all right? So it protects the organs from damaging themselves, okay? And it's found in that space in between your parietal layer and your visceral layer, okay? All right, we already saw that. So this is, I love this example. It's a really good way to explain it, all right? To understand, all right, the visceral and the parietal layers. So you got a balloon, all right, you fill it up with air, you take your fist and you push it into the balloon like it's shown in this picture here, okay? So the part of the balloon that directly covers your fist is an organ, all right, that's going to be, all right, the visceral, all right, layer, okay? And then this outer part that we see is the parietal layer. So you can see there's a space in between those 2 layers, okay? So that's going to be the serous cavity, and that's where you'll have that fluid there, okay? You guys kind of see it? You kind of get it? Okay, cool. I'm explaining this much better than I did last night, then, because you guys are on top of it. That's the advantage that you guys are going to have. Don't tell the other section I said this. But I get to practice on them, and then I get to perfect it with you, all right? It always seems to be the case. All right, so going kind of back to the body cavities, all right, we're going to see, all right, some of where these spaces are in the structure. Remember I told you with the thoracic cavity, there were a couple of spaces in there, all right, the mediastinum, all right, the pericardial cavity, and then the pleural cavity, all right? So in the actual thoracic cavity, we are going to have these structures and these spaces that are going to exist in there. So the mediastinum, if you look at the first four letters of mediastinum, it's media. If you add an N to it, that's the median space. If you guys are good with math, median is the direct center, middle number, all right? So that's what median means here in biology for anatomy. It's direct, dead center, all right, of your thoracic cavity, okay? So you do need to know this because this has been asked on a test question before. What structures are in the mediastinum, okay? Well, we're all familiar with the heart. The thymus, that's an immune gland, all right? You also have the esophagus, the trachea, and some of the major blood vessels like the aorta, okay? Those will all be located in the mediastinum, that center space cavity there of your thoracic cavity, okay? Now, also in the thoracic cavity, kind of in the middle, but a little bit off to the left, where your heart lives, is what we call the pericardium, all right? That is the serous membrane that we've named the pericardium. So it surrounds the heart, okay? And it's made up of two layers, okay? Remember we said, I'll always start with the visceral one because that's the easier one. The visceral pericardium is that layer that covers the external surface of the heart. And it's actually considered the heart's external surface there, okay? That's the visceral pericardium. And then there's a little bit of a space there, okay? That's where the serous fluid is going to be. And then you've got the parietal pericardium, and that is going to be the outer layer. Okay, so you'll hear terms like the pericardial sac. And when they talk about the pericardial sac, all right, they're referring to the parietal pericardium. Okay, so if you ever puncture the parietal pericardium, all right, but you don't puncture the visceral pericardium, and blood starts to leak into this area here, all right, that can cause your heart, all right, a lot of difficulty. Because what happens to the blood over time? Bam, it coagulates. It goes from a liquid to jello. I don't know about you, but I like to swim in a swimming pool that has water in it. I don't want to swim in a swimming pool that has jello in it. Harder to swim through. Think about what your heart has to beat through with blood getting in there, and it starts to coagulate. Okay, it's tough on it. All right. And then lastly, for the thoracic cavity, we have the pleura. Okay, again, it's a two-layered serous membrane, okay, but it has to do with this organ here, the lungs. Same, you guys kind of following the pattern here, all right? The visceral pleura is going to line directly the external surface of the lungs, all right? And then you're going to have a space surrounding that, and then you're going to have the parietal pleura, which are going to line the internal surface of the thoracic wall. Has anyone here ever heard of a pneumothorax? How do you get a pneumothorax? Well, that's what it is, but how do you get one? What can collapse your lung?
Oh, it's kind of common.
Yeah, if we manage to penetrate, if you impale yourself onto something, what will happen is you'll pierce the parietal pleura, and then the lung will collapse because the pressure outside the lung is greater, and it causes the lung to fold in on itself. And we call that a pneumothorax. Yielding depression. Yep. All right, so I'm going to zoom in here on this and just kind of show you a quick, and then we'll get back to some labeling here, guys. That's why I hate when I do that. I wanted to do this first before your brains kind of totally check out on me. All right, so here you can see, all right, we're looking at the pericardium, okay? So, I'll zoom in a little bit more. If you guys at home have any questions, feel free to chime in. All right, so imagine that same picture that I showed you with the fist, all right, going into the balloon. Here's the heart acting like the fist going into our serous membrane balloon. So this dark blue line here that's on the outside of the heart, that's the visceral pericardium. You need to be specific. If we're dealing with a specific organ like the heart, then you need to say the visceral pericardium. That's the name of this layer here. And then this light blue, that's the pericardial cavity. Okay, that's where the serous fluid will be. And then this darker blue line here, that's the parietal pericardium. Okay, that's the name for the serous membranes. All right, serous membrane is the general term. All right, but now we're at a specific organ, then we're going to use the specific term, pericardium. For the lungs, we're going to call it the pleura. Same thing here, okay? So the dark blue line that is directly on top of the pink lung, that's the visceral pleura, okay? Which represents the visceral layer of a serous membrane, okay? Then you've got your pleural space here, or cavity. And then this dark blue line on the outside, that is the parietal, all right, pleura, which represents the parietal layer of the serous membrane, okay? Cool with that? This is back in your book too. All right, last cavity that we have to do for the membranes, okay? So going down into the abdominal pelvic cavity, okay? Just to know, so you know the divisions here between the, we can subdivide the abdominal pelvic cavity into the abdominal cavity. All right, remember that example I showed you, everything that's above your hands when your hands are on your hips. All right, and then the pelvic cavity, which is everything below your hands with your hands on your hips. All right, so what are we going to find in the abdominal cavity? Most, not all, but most of the digestive system organs, all right, are kidneys. And then the tube that leads away from the kidneys, those are called the ureters. Okay? In the pelvic cavity, this is where we're going to find the last part, the distal portion. Remember, distance is, or distal is is further away from the origin. So the distal part of the large intestine. All right. The rest of the ureters are urinary bladder, and then the internal reproductive organs. Okay. So that's what we'll find there. And again, we haven't done some of the labeling on this, and we'll do that here in a few moments. Questions so far? You guys good at home? Are you paying attention to me at home? I hope so. All right, cool. All right, so the last cavity, the abdominal pelvic cavity, all right, for the serous membranes. We call, all right, two-layered serous membrane lining of the abdominal pelvic cavity the peritoneum. Okay, the peritoneum. So again, same type of pattern going on here. If it's lining directly on top of an organ, it's the visceral peritoneum. Okay, the external surface of any of the abdominal and pelvic organs. All right, visceral peritoneum. And then on the internal portion of the abdominal pelvic wall, that's the parietal peritoneum. And then the space in between, peritoneal cavity. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture here in a second. And you write a few things down, we'll take a sip. Okay, here's a picture. All right, it's tough to see. I'll zoom in a little bit. So you can see here are all the organs in the abdominal pelvic area. So, you know, parts of the stomach, parts of the small intestine, parts of the large intestine. So the dark blue line, all right, that's going over, all right, the external surface of these organs, that is going to be the visceral peritoneum. And then you can see this dark blue line that's lining, all right, the front or the anterior portion of the internal surface of your abdominal pelvic wall. That's the parietal peritoneum. And then all this space, which is highlighted by the light blue, all right, that's going to be your peritoneal cavity. So if you start to bleed in here, all right, that's when you hear the term internal bleeding. Well, blood's got to go somewhere, all right. In most cases, it's going here into the peritoneal cavity. All right, that's where it's going. And so they'll know where to look. We don't have to do this because we already did this. All right. Now let's set our brains at ease, all right, and finish up the labeling. See, now you can dial it down a little bit, all right? We can do just some labeling here. We'll give our brains a moment to relax and finish up because we only have a few more structures to label. And then we'll all go home and enjoy the weekend. We're all going to be doing studying, right, and working. Trust me, I don't go home and just relax. I wish I could. When I'm not installing windows in my house, I am going to be working on the course and making videos. And, you know, I'm going to be sending out. I had a student say something or email me about how best to stay up with the material. Every week I'll send out an announcement. And again, I will apologize again for my lengthy week 1 announcement, but it's always like that. I will make suggestions. Like you'll see me say in lecture, review chapter 1, all right, but start to read chapter 2. And so those are me making suggestions of kind of like this is where you should be. And if you're not, you might need to dedicate, if possible, and I'm hoping it is, a little bit more time to try to catch up. Because that's the last thing you want to do. You don't want to fall behind in this class. All right? It's very overwhelming, but I'll promise you this. Once you get used to it, and I'm sure this is not, is this anyone's only class? All right, I was going to say, I had one student out of all the times I've ever taught here have it be their only class, and I said, you're the luckiest person in this room because this class demands a lot of time. All right, again, I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just trying to prepare you. All right, I don't feel like I need to try to scare people. There's enough in this world to scare us. All right, let's finish up here. All right, wait a minute. Did I do the right one? Yep, okay. Kidney. All right, this is page, what did we say, 3? 2, okay. So keep in mind, we've got 2 kidneys. If you notice, okay, in this picture here, the left kidney is higher than the right kidney. Do you know why that is? Anyone know why? You notice that it's a little bit higher. The liver, not pictured there, but good guess on both of your, because it had to do with an organ, so you're kind of, you're right, there's an organ involved. It's just not here in this picture. If the liver was here, it would make a little bit more sense. But the liver is going to fill in this space here, so it pushes the left kidney down a little bit. Okay. All right. So keep in mind when it comes to labeling, like the lungs or the kidneys or the ureters, you need to be specific. Tell me if it's the left one or if it's the right one. You will lose credit if you do not say if it's the left or right one. Okay. Did you guys hear me at home? Make sure you tell me if it's the left or the right one. This one here is, I don't know, 91?
Yes.
Okay, page 91. All right, cool. Cool. I think you're the only ones that are actually paying attention online. I think everybody else has gone to sleep. I can't see your faces, so I don't know who's sleeping and who isn't. All right. Okay, that's the left kidney. Not true. Typer. Me too. I have to look at the keyboard every time. Okay, so the right kidney you can see obviously on the right side there. It's a little bit lower than the left. All right. And then you can see it here on this model here. I'm not sure what page. Did I say, is this 91?
Yeah.
This model's on 91. Okay. Okay. So I did tell you about the color coding for certain structures. Like if you see a tube and it's red, it's most likely an artery. If you see a tube and it's blue, it's most likely a vein. All right. So if you see these tubes, they're yellow. Okay. So nerves usually on these models are white, kind of tan structure, but this is straight up yellow. So that carries urine, your pee. Okay. So we're going to see that for those tubes, those are the ureters, and we'll see that in a second here. You can see this globby structure on top of the kidney. That is going to be an adrenal gland. Okay, you can also call it a supra, S-U-P-R-A, renal gland. We'll see how to spell that here in a second. All right, these are the glands that like to make cortisol, the stress hormone in your body. Aldosterone, that's what helps us to retain water. All right, also epinephrine and norepinephrine, your quote unquote adrenaline. Okay, but those are also neurotransmitters. Okay, so the left adrenal gland sits on top of the left kidney. Okay, here's the left ureter. Okay, back to page 91. Okay, yellow colors for the P that it represents. All right, so is this page 2 or 3? 2? All right, page 2. All right, so you can see here, and I'll zoom in. Here you can see, if you're never sure what it is, that when you first look at something, look to see where it's coming from and where it's going to. All right. So this here, the ureter is showing you it's leaving the kidney, it's going down in here into the urinary bladder. Okay. And look how long that pathway is for a kidney stone to travel down. Ooh, those of you that have ever had a kidney stone, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Traveling that long pathway there. All right. And here's our right ureter on page 91. All right, and then you can see the right ureter here, all right, on page 2. Okay. Here's the left adrenal gland on page 91. And here it is, the right adrenal gland here, also known as the suprarenal gland. Okay, you can use either or. I would prefer, if I were in your shoes, to just call it the adrenal gland because there's less letters to mess up. Keep it short. Pardon?
I said, then you have to know your left.
It's true. All right. Now, something that people will miss. So I have you all here in this room with me, and hopefully all of you people at home are listening. Do not call this the bladder. You need to refer to it as the urinary bladder. You give me half the name, you get half the credit. Okay? It is the urinary bladder. I know the layman's term is bladder, but we're here in our anatomy class, so we call it the urinary bladder. All right, here you can see it here, down here in the pelvic cavity. There's the urinary bladder. Is there another bladder or something? Yes, there is. You don't need to know it for this class, though, so that's why you have to be specific and refer to it as the urinary bladder. There's a fish that actually, you know how fish are able to float in the sea or in water? They have these internal bladder systems. And I can't remember the name of the fish, but there's a fish that, there's got to be more than one, but it doesn't have a bladder, so it sinks, literally. So it has to perch. It perches in rocks and coral and stuff. It's really cool. But there's a little FYI for you. I'm full of them. I'd be good on Jeopardy. Not as good as Ken Matthews. Is it Ken Matthews? I can't remember. Who's the guy that kicked butt on Jeopardy?
Oh, that was
Ken somebody.
He's on a whole new game show
OZ. Did you ever see, was it last year they did the GOATs, greatest of all time for Jeopardy? That's intimidating. Because I mean, I'm like, oh, I'm pretty good. I think I could do it. No way. Those guys are unbelievable. All right, who cares about Mesopotamian society though, right? Anyways, so we're looking here at our mid-sagittal cut here again. Okay, so here you can see is the urinary bladder. And this ought to show you something. Check it out. Here you've got the uterus, and for those of you that have been pregnant or know somebody that has been pregnant and had a baby, as the uterus grows with the baby, you can see how it pushes on the urinary bladder, hence causing mom to go to the bathroom more frequently as baby gets bigger. So it's right there in the front, pushing, pushing, pushing. All right, here it is on this model here. Okay, so you can see right behind the urinary bladder in front of the rectum is the uterus. Okay, and you can see now, I don't know what page this one's on. This one might be closer to the back, 98 maybe, and it's going to be near the end. Is it 98? I got it. I got it right. It helps when you have a cheat sheet here with some of the numbers written down. Just randomly yell out numbers. Okay, so the uterus here, thank you, Stacy. Here's the uterus. This where I'm circling is the uterus right here. Not the whole thing, okay? Now you will go into more detail in 211, okay, on parts of these of some of these systems that I'm going over right now. We're just getting you to identify general things, all right? But you will get into much more detail. All right. So right below, inferior to the uterus is the vagina. Here again, we can see the uterus on this model. Again, it's this portion right here. Which page was that on?
97.
97. All right. Okay. So, and the mid-sagittal model here, you can see this pinkish tube-like structure. All right. That is the fallopian tube. You can also refer to it as the uterine tube. Okay. Uterine fallopian tube. And part of the fallopian uterine tube is approximating itself around this tannish circular structure, excuse me, that's the ovary. Now, I am not going to require you to tell me if this is the left or right uterine or fallopian tube. Okay, for this you don't have to. Okay, for the other ones, you do. Okay, so if you just put down fallopian tube or uterine tube on this, you'll be okay. Okay. All right. And you don't have to do it on this one either. Okay. But here's the fallopian or uterine tube, this pinkish structure right here. All right, and here you can see it again on page 97, right here. All right, there's the ovary. That tannish, it looks tannish to me. And here it is on that model right there. All right, on to the male reproductive system. All right. On this model, again, this is a sagittal cut model. It's not a mid-sagittal. Here's the penis here. Oh, that's a great question. 95? 94? 94. There's some, I couldn't try to be funny about it. This guy's a biker. No, it's just on the model. I'm not sure why. I think it might be actually holding that piece onto the rest of the model, but I don't know. Every semester somebody asks me. All right, let's go on. Here, I don't know what page this one's on. And in fact, I think we couldn't. Is it on the same page? It's something similar to that, though, I believe. Okay. So, here again is the penis. And I think there's one more model that we're using. Yep, this one here. I can't remember which page is that.
That's on 95.
95, okay. All right. Almost done, you guys. You're doing great. And page 4. Yep. I know there's 2 pages, 95 and page 4. All right. So behind the penis here, inside the scrotum, you've got the testes. Now, be very aware. This part is the testes. All right. I don't know if that looks purplish or whatever. This part here is something different. We'll see that in a second here. Okay. Okay. So make sure that you know the difference. These are 2 different structures. All right. So this is the testes here. And here you can see it on that model there. No, you do not, Zach, you do not have to identify left or right for the testes. Just for like the lungs and the kidneys and whatnot. And all right, and let's move. This is page 95 or page 4. All right, there's the other testes. Okay. So Right below the urinary bladder there, you can see in males we have the prostate gland, okay? So you can actually see why, well, two things from this. One, when a man has to get a digital rectal exam, right behind the prostate is the rectum. So it's in close proximity, so that's how they're able to tell if a man has prostate cancer or benign BPH, a benign prostate enlargement there, okay? And what happens is when the prostate enlarges, you can see that you have this tube here. This is the urethra. That's where urine leaves to exit out of the body. But when the prostate enlarges, it squeezes down on that urethra there. It makes it much more difficult to urinate, empty the bladder, or initiate urination. Here you can see a little bit of a better view. Here's the prostate right below the urinary bladder there. All right, and then this, I can't remember what page this one's on.
It's not enough.
That's 95, thank you. All right, so you can see it kind of from the side and the back here, all right, wedged in between the urinary bladder and the rectum now. All right, so going back to the scrotum here, this is what I wanted to point out. This is a different structure. This is the epididymis. The epididymis is this kind of a ridge-line structure that sits on top of the testes. Okay, so don't confuse that. All right, that is not the testes. I've had people lose points on that, and I don't like that. Here you can see it. It's this structure right here. Right, the epididymis.
Big line or right above that?
Hold
Like
on.
that curve.
Here, I'll show you this part right here. Anything in the blue, that's the epididymis. What is it showing on the left testis? Oh, over here, left testis, this is showing you, this is what's called the cremasteric muscle fiber. That's actually muscle fibers. You'll get to learn about that next semester, but, well, sorry, ladies, you won't know this, but gentlemen, you do. If you get into a cold pool, cold water, normally what happens, the reason why the testicles are outside the body is because they need to be at a cooler temperature than the internal body temperature. And when you get into a cold water situation or a cold environment, the scrotum muscles and these muscles here will retract a little bit to draw them closer to the body to keep the testicles warmer. There's actually a reflex in which they'll stimulate the inside of your spine, the inside of your thigh. It's called the cremasteric reflex, and they'll do that to test these muscle fibers. And if it's not working, then you, usually, I can't remember, I think it's L1 and L2, those spinal cord, those spinal nerves are compromised. So that's probably more of what you wanted, Heather, but that's what you get for asking me a question.
That slide.
We storm is actually on page 60.
Which one? This one here?
That one right there.
That's on page 60. Oh,
So
okay.
we do have it.
You do have it. All right. We couldn't find it last night. What about this one? Is this the one that's on page?
Yeah, that's the one that's.
This is 90. Okay. So, what I know there's a lot of. Well, trust me. This will all be you'll in 211. You'll be labeling all this stuff here. All right, but this is the ductus deferens or the vas deferens. This is the tube that connects the testicles to the prostate gland. Right, this is where the sperm travels up into the body. Right, so when a man gets a vasectomy, that's what gets snipped. All right, you can use either or, ductus deferens or the vas deferens. All right, and you can see it here, okay, on the urinary bladder right here. That is the ductus deferens or vas deferens. All right, that's it. Everything's labeled. Okay, So do me a favor before you leave, make sure that you do sign in for the lab, okay? And I would like to have one volunteer hang out with me while we wipe down the, you want to do it? Perfect, thank you. What's your name?
Gracie.
Gracie, cool, thank you very much. If there's any question, is there any questions, anybody? At home or here? I'm looking at the screen and looking at you guys. Okay. If, nope, all right. Well, if there is, ask me, and of course, email me, all right? If there's none, have a good night. And I will see you guys next Thursday. And I'll see you guys at home on Tuesday. Okay.